Ethan had everything he ever wanted: a thriving career, a beautiful wife, and a life that seemed perfect on the outside. But one fateful phone call from his old friend Tom turned his world upside down. Emily, the woman he trusted most, was at a party with another man, acting in ways that no married woman should. What Ethan didn't know was that this phone call was only the beginning of a journey that would test his very sense of self-worth, loyalty, and the power of healing. Ethan's life had all the markings of success. At 35, he had worked his way up the corporate ladder to become a respected financial consultant. His wife, Emily, 33, was a celebrated fashion designer, admired for her sharp eye for trends and impeccable taste. They lived in a luxurious home in a prestigious neighborhood, surrounded by friends, work events, and the type of life others could only dream of. To everyone on the outside, they were the perfect couple: successful, beautiful, and happy. But behind the facade, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Emily's career had begun to demand more of her attention, leaving Ethan to handle the weight of their home life. The late nights, the endless parties, the work functions, they became Emily's world, while Ethan's focus was on advancing his career. What had once been an intimate connection began to drift, and the love they once shared started to feel like an obligation. Neither of them addressed it directly, but there was a creeping distance between them. Ethan noticed it but never spoke of it. He trusted Emily, and that was enough until it wasn't. That nagging feeling grew stronger as the months passed, like an itch that couldn't be scratched. Ethan thought it was just the pressures of work, or perhaps the strain of their different careers pulling them in opposing directions. But deep down, he knew something had changed. The moment when the world would come crashing down was drawing closer. Ethan just didn't realize it yet. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Ethan's life was supposed to be perfect. That night, after another late meeting, he sat down with a glass of wine, ready to call it a day. His phone buzzed with a message from Tom, an old friend. The message didn't seem like much at first, but as Ethan read it, his stomach sank. "Emily's at a party with Jake. She's acting like she's not married." Ethan stared at the message, disbelief creeping in. Emily? At a party with another man? It didn't make sense. He shook his head, convinced that Tom had misinterpreted something. "No way," Ethan muttered to himself. But despite his mind's resistance, a deep unease settled over him. Why would Tom say something like that if it wasn't true? Unable to shake the feeling, Ethan called Emily. She answered quickly, her voice far too chipper. He asked her where she was, and she hesitated before quickly assuring him it was just a harmless gathering with some friends. But the way she said it, too defensive, too rehearsed, only added to the suspicion gnawing at him. "I love you," she said, but the words felt empty, desperate, almost as if she were trying too hard to convince herself of the truth. Something wasn't right, and as Ethan lay awake that night, the weight of that uncertainty pressed down on him. Could this be real? Could Emily, his Emily, be slipping away? The next few days felt like a blur for Ethan. He tried to push the doubts aside, telling himself he was overthinking it. But the more he tried to ignore it, the louder the questions became. Something was off. So when Emily left her phone on the kitchen counter, Ethan couldn't resist. He told himself it was just for peace of mind, just to reassure himself that Tom had misunderstood. But when he opened the phone and stumbled upon the hidden video, everything changed. There, in full clarity, was Emily, his wife, caught in an intimate moment with another man. Jake. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched, every fiber of his being screaming in disbelief. This wasn't just a rumor. This wasn't just an accusation. It was real. Ethan felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath him. The woman he had built his life with, the one he had trusted more than anyone, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend the reality of what he was seeing. Was this really the woman he had married? His hands shook as he dropped the phone onto the table. The pain, the heartbreak, the rage, all of it hit him at once. There was no excuse, no justification. It was clear. Emily had cheated on him. And in that moment, Ethan knew his world would never be the same again. Ethan couldn't wait any longer. The silence between him and Emily had grown unbearable, and the truth was too loud to ignore. He decided that it was time to confront her, but nothing could prepare him for what would happen next. When Emily walked in that evening, Ethan was already waiting, his heart pounding in his chest. The tension was thick, and as soon as she saw him, she knew. There was no hiding it now. He asked her point blank, his voice shaking, but filled with determination. Why Emily? Why him? Her face paled. For a moment, she looked like a stranger, like the woman he had once loved, but someone who had lost her way. She stammered, trying to find the right words, but nothing she said could undo the damage. It was a mistake, she pleaded, but the words were hollow. It meant nothing, I swear. But Ethan couldn't hear it. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces. Every word she spoke felt like a lie, and he could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the shame, but also the fear. She didn't want this, but she had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Emily, I can't do this anymore, Ethan said, his voice firm despite the tears threatening to spill. I can't stay with someone who has broken me like this. It's over. Her cries filled the room, but Ethan didn't flinch. He had already made his decision. The life they had built together had ended. And in that moment, he realized that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that set you free. The divorce was finalized quickly, but the pain lingered long after the papers were signed. Ethan moved out of their shared home, the one they had filled with dreams of a future together. The empty apartment felt cold and unfamiliar, like a prison. He stayed with Mark, an old friend, while he navigated the separation. Every day felt like a battle against his emotions. He didn't know who he was without Emily by his side. He had built his entire identity around their marriage, and now, with it gone, he felt lost. The quiet nights were the hardest. No more laughter, no more shared memories. Just silence and the echo of what had been. But slowly the pain began to fade. Ethan started going to therapy, processing the deep hurt and trying to find the man he had once been before Emily. He reconnected with friends he had neglected and took up old hobbies that had long since been abandoned. It wasn't an easy road, but with each step he felt a little stronger. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: he couldn't live in the past forever. The divorce had broken him, but it also gave him the chance to rebuild himself. And that was something no one, not even Emily, could take away from him. After the divorce, Ethan knew he needed to heal. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, but he couldn't stay stuck in the darkness forever. One of the first steps was to attend therapy. At first, it felt like just another box to check, something he was supposed to do to move on. But as the sessions continued, he began to open up. His therapist helped him understand the depth of his pain and how to process it. He had been so consumed by Emily, by their life together, that he had forgotten to nurture himself. With the support of therapy, Ethan reconnected with his sense of self. He started to rebuild his identity, not as Emily's husband, but as Ethan the individual. He rediscovered old passions that had taken a backseat during the marriage. Guitar, which he had played as a teenager, became a solace. Every strum, every note, allowed him to express the emotions he couldn't put into words. Hiking, another love of his, became a way to clear his mind, to reconnect with nature and his own thoughts. With each step along the trail, he could feel the weight of his past lifting ever so slightly. But it wasn't just about the activities. It was about learning to love himself again. He'd spent so much time pouring his energy into someone else that he had forgotten how to take care of his own heart. Slowly, he started to believe that he was worthy of love, not because of who he was with, but because of who he was as an individual. A few months into his healing journey, Ethan found himself at a hiking group meetup in the mountains, an experience he had signed up for on a whim. It wasn't something he had done in a while, but he felt drawn to it, something to help him feel alive again. As the group hiked through the rugged terrain, Ethan found himself talking to Claire, a woman in her late 20s with an infectious energy and a genuine warmth that immediately put him at ease. Claire was different from anyone he had ever known. She was kind, down to earth, and wasn't trying to impress anyone. Her life was simpler, less complicated, and she had an authenticity that Ethan hadn't realized he missed so desperately. They shared stories of their pasts, Ethan talking about the heartbreak of his divorce, Claire about her experiences as a photographer, and her struggles with balancing passion with reality. They laughed about their awkwardness on the hike, bonded over shared experiences, and before they knew it, the day had passed by in a blur. Over the next few weeks, they stayed in touch, their conversations easy and natural. Ethan didn't want to rush things, but he found himself looking forward to seeing her again. There was no pressure, no expectations. Just a sense of connection that felt completely different from the heavy emotional baggage he had carried for so long. Claire wasn't a replacement for Emily, but she represented something new, a fresh start, a chance for Ethan to open his heart again without fear of the past repeating itself. As life moved forward, Ethan found himself more at peace with the choices he had made. But one day, as fate would have it, he ran into Emily again. It was an accidental encounter in a cafe, of all places. At first, neither of them recognized each other. Ethan was lost in thought, sipping his coffee, when he heard a familiar voice call his name. He looked up, and there she was, Emily, standing in front of him. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The old familiar ache tried to resurface, but Ethan stopped it in its tracks. This wasn't the same man who had been torn apart by her betrayal. This was someone stronger, someone who had learned to stand on his own 2 feet. They exchanged pleasantries, awkward at first, but the conversation soon became more natural. Emily asked how he had been, and he told her about the journey he had gone through since the divorce. He didn't need to dwell on the pain anymore, it was behind him, a chapter he had closed. When Emily apologized again, he realized it didn't hurt as much as it used to. He had forgiven her, but more importantly, he had forgiven himself. Their brief encounter served as the closure Ethan needed. He didn't need to keep holding on to the anger or resentment. It was time to let go of the past once and for all. And with that, he walked away, feeling lighter than he had in years. As time went on, Ethan's bond with Claire grew deeper. They began spending more time together hiking, grabbing coffee, talking about their hopes and dreams. With Claire, Ethan felt an ease he hadn't felt in years. She encouraged him to pursue his passions, to be himself without fear of judgment. And in return, he supported her in her photography career, sharing in her excitement as her work gained more recognition. But this wasn't just about companionship. It was about finding a partner who respected him for who he was, flaws and all. There was no rush, no pressure to make things work. It was natural, easy, and comfortable, something that had been missing in his past relationships. And as they spent more time together, Ethan realized that he was finally starting to trust again. He had learned to let go of the fear that the past would repeat itself. With Claire, there was a sense of peace he had never known. They didn't label their relationship. It didn't need a title. They were simply two people who had found something real, something honest. Ethan no longer worried about the baggage of his past, or whether he was ready for love again. He just knew that with Claire, he was finally able to be the man he had always hoped to be, someone worthy of love, joy, and happiness. The final chapter of Ethan's journey wasn't about finding someone else to fill the void left by his divorce, it was about rediscovering himself. Through the pain of betrayal, he had found strength. Through the loneliness, he had learned the value of self-love. And through the uncertainty, he had discovered that his happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else. Ethan's life was no longer about fixing what was broken. It was about creating something new, from the ground up. He wasn't perfect, he didn't have it all figured out, but he was okay with that. For the first time in years, Ethan was truly free. He was no longer haunted by the ghost of his past, and as he looked forward to the future, he knew that whatever came his way, he would handle it with grace and resilience. With Claire by his side, Ethan was ready to embrace whatever life had in store. No longer defined by the pain of his past, he was free to build a future that reflected the man he had become. Thanks for watching. Ethan's journey of healing and self-discovery is complete, but his story doesn't end here. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more stories of hope, love, and strength.